You know what this is. I got a pile of books. I'm gonna read them, jeez. And this is Curveball. Curveball by Jeremy Sorese is a beautifully illustrated science fiction book mainly focused around the character Avery Bird, who, like most of us, is just trying to take every day as it comes. But unfortunately, Avery Bird is haunted by the bitter feelings of resentment and betrayal from their past romance with the rakish sailor Kristoff. The story takes place in a distant future where technology is even more integrated into our daily life, as the movements and actions of the denizens are integral to powering the city. That energy produced is not just necessary for powering electronics and lights, but it's actually a crucial element for the building material of the city itself, as power surges or snaps leading to the disruption of infrastructure or even the destruction of entire city blocks of buildings. And despite the doom and gloom of these characters living in a world where a citywide disaster can happen at any moment, Jeremy Sorese's background as a painter allows him to set the story in an impressively lavish world. Sorese shows off his mastery with value, as the dark shadows and exaggerated forms bring to mind influences of German Expressionism. The liveliness of the contours and the grit of the texture work in tandem to execute some of the more difficult emotions in this book. And after this video, go check out Jeremy's paintings. I mean, he plays so lavishly with color and light and captures the human body in such expressive ways. And aside from the illustration, the book itself is such a lovely art object. I really don't know if the camera can capture the beautiful colors and the paper stock of this book, how nice it feels in my hand. Beautifully designed and printed, the interiors are black and white, but all throughout the book you'll find this bright orange spot coloring, an effect utilized throughout the story to represent the use of energy and technology. And it really feels like the pages emit a neon glow, and it's used quite effectively in some of the more impactful moments of the book, particularly when a burst of emotion or energy is being depicted. I will criticize that there are at least 2 pages that are very difficult to read because of this glow, but otherwise it is thoughtfully applied. I was really caught off guard with the way Sorese tells this story. We start off with a dramatic sequence. A surprise air raid in the night wreaks havoc on a fleet of Navy ships protecting the shores of our story's setting. The crew rushes to extinguish fires and attempts to defend from the attack and return to shore. As the scene closes, we're introduced to Avery, who's being onboarded to safety protocols at the fine dining establishment where they work. And depending on whether you worked in food service or not, maybe the comparison to a war zone in the high seas isn't that big of a leap. And from there, we follow Avery's life, where it blooms with secondary and tertiary characters. And as Sorese begins to build that dimension to this world, it's hard to think that Curveball is just Avery's story, especially when we get so many glimpses into the lives of other characters. It's interesting because I feel like a good portion of the book doesn't really root itself within the conflict that the protagonist faces. Actually, Sorese puts quite a bit of focus into the non-dramatic parts of Avery's life. In fact, one of my favorite exchanges in the whole book doesn't even have the main character in it. It's this really cute exchange between Avery's roommate Jacqueline and a woman she's on a date with at a diner. And I really found myself asking, where's this story taking me? So lately I've been trying to learn how to become a better writer, and I've been studying a little bit about the origins of 5 and 3-act story structure, learning about all the small pieces that come together to create a compelling arc for a story. There's 2 books I'm reading. One is Into the Woods by John York and Save the Cat by Blake Snyder. These 2 books have been highly recommended to me, and I highly recommend them myself. Both Snyder and York compel us to invest ourselves a little more in the media that we consume, primarily in an effort to build our media literacy, to help us understand why we enjoy the books, movies, comics that we do. So from this, we can start to identify why some stories work, and just as importantly, why some of them don't. Okay, this is gonna feel like a tangent. I swear I'm going somewhere with this. This is still a book recommendation video. Okay. Did you guys watch Materialists? In Celine Song's 2025 rom-com Materialists, a materialistic matchmaker is stuck in a love triangle between her super rich bachelor suitor and her not so super rich ex-boyfriend. This love story is set in the luxurious backdrop of the higher echelons of the New York upper class. So obviously as a Pisces, I had a hard time relating to this film. So rather than just sit in the theater and dissociate for 2 hours, I decided I'd try to apply some of the things that I'm learning about story and structure. Perhaps there was something I could learn as to why I couldn't get a grip around this film.
I deserve someone who fulfills all of my criteria.
Yet as I watched, something felt off about the movie, especially when I tried applying the lessons that I learned about 3-act story structure. I struggled to find where we were in the character's arc. The acts, they blend together like large dominoes slowly knocking over bigger dominoes, if that makes sense. Like the film was placidly walking protagonist through the story, and whenever conflict happens, it feels like whiplash. By the end of the story, the main character really doesn't transform. You wonder if they made the right choices, or if the circumstances even changed at all. Suffice to say, the movie didn't tie itself in a neat bow, and I've read enough stories and I've seen enough movies to know that the author has that right. For those familiar with Celine Song's debut film, Past Lives, you would know that we get so much of these characters, but we get very little in regards to answers to the protagonist's problems. So as the audience, we simply become witnesses to that moment. Swear to God, there's a point to this. Thanks for hanging on. If anything, I've had more fun talking about this movie with my friends than I really had watching it. But that's when my buddy Austin put me onto something. He asked if I ever heard of Kisho Tenketsu. Okay. Gosh. He asked if I've ever heard of Kisho Tenketsu. Kisho Tenketsu is the Japanese name for the 4-act story structure, originally found in the Chinese poetry of the Tang Dynasty, and then later adopted or similarly constructed in Korea and Japan. 4 parts that make up the structure are the introduction, the development, the twist, and the conclusion. So the 4 acts really aren't too dissimilar to the Western 3-act story structures, as both forms require the setup, rising action to a climax, and then the denouement into the resolution. Denouement is just a fancy word for the declining action at the end of a story. But with Kisho Tenketsu, the 3rd act is really more of a deliberate disruption to the current circumstance of the story. Let me explain. In Materialists, we see this major shift happen at the midpoint of the story. With any kind of story writing, the midpoint is meant to be a big dividing point. To summarize what happens in the film, a sexual assault flips the world upside down for our protagonist, basically taking us away from the central love story that had been the focus up to that point in the movie. And here's where things start to differ greatly from the Western monomyth, or the hero's journey as we more commonly know it. You see, Dakota Johnson's character, the protagonist, was not set up to handle this disruption. Nothing in the movie indicated we were going to experience this whiplash in the middle of the film. I mean, that's great, you want to keep people on their toes. But our hero didn't have the help of a wise old man or pulled out a magical sword that could solve this problem. Imagine if Harry Potter didn't get a cloak and John McClane didn't get an Uzi.
I have a machine gun.
Just like reality, you deal with it as it comes. Hitchcock said drama is life, with all the dull bits cut out. And I think what's happening with Celine Song's films is that the stuff between the drama, it's not dull. It's just real. Reality isn't always exciting, and that's what makes such unexpected disruptions so dramatic and interesting. Just like life, we're never prepared to deal with sickness, with death, and in the case of Jeremy Sorese's Curveball, heartbreak. I'm not trying to break down whether Curveball fits in the 4-act story structure or not. I'm learning that there's just universal aspects of storytelling that span across many cultures. And really, you can overanalyze any piece of media to fit whatever interpretation you want. And while I try to keep these videos as short recommendations, I couldn't help myself but to dive into the analysis. I feel like Sorese's writing really put me onto something new. I found myself struggling to put Curveball in a box using a Western monomyth perspective, but Jeremy Sorese wrote such a personal story, and those don't always fit in the boxes. The writing thrives in its interpersonal dialogue. Things said between characters, they're not really meant to be overheard by the reader. And what's happening is that we're eavesdropping. We're actually listening into the life of Avery and the people and robots that surround their day-to-day life. That means we get to see the ugly crying, we get to see the awkward conversations and the messy relationships. Even the supporting characters, the people in the background, you get a sense of their struggle even though they don't profess their problems in an obtuse monologue. In real life, it's hard to communicate what you actually mean. So it makes sense that in Curveball, bottled up emotions often end up in explosive outcomes. It's like noticing when 2 people are breaking up at the table across from you at the coffee shop. The book makes the reader a voyeur to the strangers. In a story set however many years into a technologically advanced future, love and heartbreak is still the same. Life is still life. And so by the end of Curveball, despite a citywide disaster, characters and relationships, they kind of end up where they began. Flaws or conflicts not necessarily fixed, but maybe everyone's a little wiser for it, which in real life is all you can really hope for. Thank you all so much for sticking around to the end. This wasn't planned, but it's actually the 10-year anniversary since Curveball came out, so please, if you need another reason to check it out, grab a copy now. Jeremy Sorese has mainly been focusing on his painting lately, so please go check out his website or his Instagram to see more of his phenomenal work. And Jeremy, congrats on the wedding. That was a long one. Thanks again for watching, and I'll buy my book, newsletter, you know the deal.